April 1945. The transport ship docked in Galveston, Texas, carrying cargo no one wanted to acknowledge. 63 German prisoners of war, none older than 18, some as young as 13. Klaus Müller stood on deck, shackles biting his wrists, watching American soil approach with hollow eyes. He was 15 years old. He'd killed 3 American soldiers at the Battle of the Bulge. He'd watched his entire Hitler Youth unit get slaughtered. He'd surrendered covered in blood, some his, most not. "They'll execute us," whispered Stefan beside him. 13 years old, baby-faced, still crying for his mother at night. "Children soldiers. They'll call us war criminals. Better than what we deserve," Klaus muttered. He thought of the American medic he'd shot. The boy couldn't have been older than 20. Blonde hair, kind face, reaching out to help a wounded German soldier when Klaus's panic pulled the trigger. "I didn't want to fight," Stefan's voice broke. "They came to my school, said I was old enough, said the Führer needed every German. I was 12, I didn't even know how to shoot yet." Klaus said nothing. What was there to say? They were child soldiers, yes, but they'd still killed, still served evil, still wore the uniform that represented everything monstrous about the regime that had stolen their childhoods. The ship docked. American guards boarded, weapons ready, faces hard. "Out," commanded the lead sergeant. "Single file, hands visible. Anyone runs, we shoot." They filed onto Texas soil. 63 German boys who should have been in school, playing football, chasing girls, being children. Instead, they were combat veterans with dead eyes and the capacity for violence. A crowd had gathered. Texans curious about the enemy prisoners. Klaus expected hatred, curses, maybe stones thrown. Instead, he heard gasps. "Jesus Christ, they're children," a woman's voice carried. "Those are babies." "The oldest can't be 16, someone else added. "What kind of monsters send children to fight?" "German monsters," a man spat. "Don't feel sorry for them. They killed our boys." "They are boys," the first woman countered. "Victims and perpetrators both. That's the tragedy." Klaus kept his eyes down, following the line toward waiting trucks. But he'd heard, and something in his chest, something he'd thought had died at the bulge, stirred slightly. Pity. They pitied him. The trucks drove for hours, through landscape Klaus had never imagined, flat, endless, dusty. Nothing like Germany, nothing like home, home. The word felt foreign. His home was rubble. His mother dead in Hamburg bombings, his father executed for defeatist talk. Home was a memory from before everything burned. Camp Herne appeared on the horizon, rows of barracks, watchtowers, barbed wire, a prison, as expected. But something was different. The camp looked organized, clean. The barracks had actual roofs. Gardens grew between buildings. American soldiers moved with discipline, not cruelty. "Welcome to Camp Herne," announced the camp commandant, Colonel Robert Parker, a grey-haired man with a stern face softened by something Klaus couldn't identify. Weariness, compassion. "You're the youngest group we've processed. That creates complications." He paused, studying the line of child soldiers with an expression that made Klaus want to look away. "You're technically prisoners of war, but you're also children. Some of you were conscripted against your will. Some of you fought because you believed lies. Some of you are victims of a regime that stole your childhood and turned you into weapons." Parker's voice was measured. "We will not add to that crime by treating you as adults. You will be held accountable for your actions. Yes, but you will also be treated as what you are. Children who deserve a chance to be children again." Before we discover how Texas would treat these child soldiers differently, tell us where you're watching from. Are you in the USA, Germany, or somewhere else following this profound story? We love connecting with viewers who understand that war's youngest victims deserve our compassion, not just our judgment. "What does that mean?" Klaus heard himself ask in broken English. "It means you'll work, yes, but you'll also attend school. Learn skills, receive proper nutrition for growing bodies, and—" Parker's expression softened completely. You'll be fed like the children you are. Not starvation rations, not punishment meals, real food, American food, starting with dinner tonight. What's dinner? Stefan whispered. You'll see, Parker said. Dismissed to barracks, unload your gear. Dinner at 1800 hours. They were assigned to Barracks D, 63 boys, crammed into bunks designed for 40, but the building was warm, dry. The bunks had actual mattresses. This is a trick, said Otto, the oldest at 18, scarred and bitter. They're softening us up, making us comfortable before the interrogations, the torture, the executions. Or maybe Americans are different, suggested Franz, a 16-year-old who'd lost his leg at Normandy. Maybe they actually follow Geneva Convention. For children's soldiers, we're war criminals. There's no convention for us. Then why give us beds? Klaus touched the mattress, thin but real, not straw. Why mention school and nutrition? Seems like a lot of effort for people they plan to execute. The barracks fell silent. Because Klaus was right, this didn't make sense for condemned prisoners. At 1800 hours, guards escorted them to the mess hall, a large building filled with long tables. American soldiers sat on one side, German boys directed to the other, and then Klaus saw the serving line. Food, real food, not the watery soup and moldy bread they'd eaten in German trenches, not the starvation rations of retreat. Hamburgers, thick patties on soft buns, French fries, baked beans, and bottles of something dark that fizzed. What is that? Stefan pointed at the bottles. Coca-Cola. An American guard answered in German. Soda. You've never had it. 63 heads shook. Well, you're about to. Welcome to Texas, boys. Everything's bigger here, including the mercy we show kids who got dealt a shit hand. Klaus stood frozen in line, staring at the hamburger a cafeteria worker placed on his tray. It was massive, twice the size of his fist. The smell made his stomach cramp with desperate hunger. Is this real? He asked in English. Real as Texas itself, the worker replied. She was older, maybe 60, with kind eyes. Eat up, hun. Your skin and bones, growing boys need proper meals. She called him Hon, a term of endearment for a German soldier. Klaus carried his tray to a table, sat between Stefan and Franz, and stared at his food like it might vanish. Around him, other boys did the same, staring, disbelieving, trembling. If this is a dream, don't wake me, Stefan whispered. Klaus picked up the hamburger, awkward, huge in his hands. He bit carefully. Flavor exploded. Beef, cheese, pickles, ketchup, mustard, all combining into something his brain couldn't process. He'd forgotten food could taste like this, could taste like anything beyond desperation. He chewed slowly, swallowed, felt tears burning his eyes. Klaus? Stefan's voice was concerned. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, that's the problem. Klaus's voice cracked. This is good. This is really good. And they gave it to us, to enemies, to child soldiers who killed their people. They gave us the same food they eat. I can see American soldiers' plates. Same hamburgers, same fries, same portions. He looked down at his tray, at the Coca-Cola bottle, sweating condensation. Why would they do that? His question hung in the air. Why show mercy to people like us? No one answered, because none of them understood. They'd been taught Americans were weak, soft, decadent. That democracy made people cowardly. But this abundance shared with enemies, this dignity extended to child soldiers who deserved punishment, this wasn't weakness. This was something else entirely, something Klaus didn't have words for. Something that tasted like hamburgers and Coca-Cola, and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't as cruel as Hitler had promised. The hamburger sat heavy in Klaus's stomach that night. The first full meal he'd eaten in 6 months. He lay in his bunk, listening to 62 other boys process the same shock. I thought they'd starve us, Stefan whispered from the bunk above. Mama said Americans torture prisoners, that they're monsters who hate Germans. Your mama was wrong, Franz replied from across the aisle. Or maybe she was lied to, like we were lied to about everything. Don't, Otto's voice cut through the darkness. Don't start questioning. Don't let one good meal make you forget who we are, what we did. We're soldiers of the Reich. We don't betray that for hamburgers and kindness. The Reich is dead, Klaus said quietly. Berlin is fallen. Hitler's probably dead. We're not soldiers anymore. We're just boys who got used as weapons, and now we're prisoners trying to figure out what comes next. What comes next is execution, or lifelong imprisonment. Otto's bitterness was palpable. Don't be naive. This treatment is temporary. Wait until they start interrogations. Wait until they demand information. Wait until they realize we're not innocent children. We're combat veterans who killed their friends. Klaus didn't answer, because Otto was right about one thing. They weren't innocent. Klaus had killed, had followed orders, had been part of a machine that murdered millions. But the hamburger, the Coca-Cola, the mattress, the clean clothes they'd been issued, the cafeteria worker calling him on, none of it fit the narrative of what prisoners deserved. Morning came with reveille at 600. The boys stumbled outside for roll call, expecting brutality, receiving only brisk efficiency. Colonel Parker addressed them. Today, you'll be divided into work groups and educational cohorts. Those under 16 will attend school half-days, basic education, English language, vocational skills. Those 16 and older will work full days, ranch work, construction, maintenance. All will receive 3 full meals daily, medical care, and recreation time. Why? Klaus heard himself ask again. Why educate us? Why care if we learn or grow or survive? Parker fixed him with a steady gaze. Because you're 15 years old. Because regardless of what you've done, you have 60+ years ahead of you. Because sending you back to Germany as broken, uneducated boys serves no one, not you, not Germany, not the world trying to rebuild. We're investing in your future because the alternative is creating another generation of angry young men with nothing to lose, and we've seen where that leads. He dismissed them to their assignments. Klaus was assigned to ranch work, riding out with American cowboys to tend cattle on the massive property surrounding Camp Hearn. His supervisor was a man named Buck Harrison, 60 years old, weathered face, Texas drawl thick as honey. "You ever work cattle, boy?" Buck asked as he saddled horses. "No, sir. I'm from Hamburg. City boy." "Well, you're a country boy now. Get on that horse. Her name's Daisy. She's gentle, won't throw you unless you give her reason." Buck studied Klaus. "How old are you really?" 15. "Ah, Jesus." Buck shook his head. "My grandson's 15. He's worried about getting a date to the spring dance. You're worried about, what, war crimes, tribunals?" "Yes, sir. That's obscene. That's what war does. Takes boys and turns them into soldiers before they've figured out how to be men." Buck mounted his horse with practiced ease. "Come on. Cattle don't wait for existential crises." And they rode across prairie that stretched forever. Klaus had never seen so much open space. In Germany, everything was contained, structured, bordered. Here, the land seemed to have no end. "See those cattle?" Buck pointed to a herd in the distance. "They need checking. Make sure none are sick, injured, or straying. Simple work, honest work, the kind that doesn't require killing anyone." They worked until midday. Buck showed Klaus how to approach cattle, how to spot sickness, how to move confidently without spooking the herd. He was patient, corrective, but never cruel, treating Klaus like an apprentice rather than a prisoner. At lunch, Buck pulled out sandwiches, ham and cheese, chips, apples. He handed half to Klaus without comment. "You're sharing your food?" Klaus asked, confused. "You're working. Workers eat. That's how it works." Buck bit into his sandwich. "Tell me something. How'd you end up in the war so young?" "Hitler Youth. Mandatory conscription. By 1944, they were taking anyone who could hold a rifle. I was 14 when they put me in uniform." "Did you want to fight?" Klaus was quiet for a long time. "I wanted to serve Germany. I believed what they told us, that we were defending the fatherland, that enemies surrounded us, that sacrifice was noble. I didn't understand what they were really asking until I was in combat, until I saw what war actually means." "And what does it mean?" "Horror. Just endless horror. Nothing noble, nothing heroic. Just boys killing boys because old men made decisions and young men pay the price. Klaus set down his sandwich, appetite gone. I killed an American medic. He was trying to help a wounded German soldier. I panicked, shot him. He died in the snow, and his last words were, "It's okay, kid, it's okay." Like he was forgiving me even as he died. Buck was silent for a long moment. That's a heavy weight for a 15-year-old. It's the weight I deserve. Maybe not. Maybe you deserve a chance to be better than your worst moment. To build something good from the ashes of what burned. Buck stood, brushed off his jeans. That medic, he forgave you. Maybe it's time you start forgiving yourself. Not forgetting, not excusing, but forgiving. There's a difference. That evening, dinner was meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, and chocolate cake. Klaus ate mechanically, tasting nothing, Buck's words echoing in his mind. Forgiving himself. The concept seemed obscene. How could he forgive himself for murder? Klaus. Stefan appeared at his table. Some of the American soldiers are playing baseball outside. They asked if any of us want to learn. Want to try? I don't know how to play baseball. Neither do I. That's why they're teaching. Stefan's eyes held something Klaus hadn't seen in months. Hope. Come on, what else are we going to do? Sit here feeling guilty? That doesn't help anyone. Klaus followed reluctantly. Outside, a dozen American soldiers had organized an impromptu baseball game. They were teaching German boys how to hold bats, how to throw, how to run bases. Here, try this, a young corporal said, handing Klaus a bat. Just swing when the ball comes. Don't overthink it. Klaus gripped the bat awkwardly. The corporal tossed an easy pitch. Klaus swung, missed completely. The Americans laughed, not cruel, just amused. Try again. Keep your eye on the ball. Klaus swung again. Connected. The ball sailed into the outfield. The Americans cheered. Nice hit, kid. Run! Klaus ran, awkward, confused about where to go, but running. Stefan shouted directions from the sidelines. Other German boys cheered. American soldiers guided him toward first base. He reached it, breathing hard, and looked back at the group of enemies-turned-teammates who were applauding his clumsy success. And for the first time since Hamburg burned, since his mother died, since he put on a uniform and learned to kill, Klaus felt something besides guilt and fear. He felt like a 15-year-old boy playing a game. And that feeling, that small, fragile, impossible feeling, was more terrifying than any combat he'd survived, because it meant hope was possible, and hope hurt worse than despair ever could. School began the next week for boys under 16. They sat in a converted barracks, 31 German adolescents staring suspiciously at American textbooks and a teacher named Mrs. Eleanor Walsh. She was perhaps 45, with greying hair and wire-rimmed glasses, and she addressed them in fluent German. "Good morning. I'm Mrs. Walsh. I taught high school in Dallas before volunteering here. I'm going to teach you English, American history, mathematics, and life skills. You're going to resist. You're going to think you don't need education because you're prisoners who'll be executed or deported. You're wrong." She switched to English. "You have futures. Whether those futures are in America, in Germany, or elsewhere, you'll need skills, you'll need language, you'll need knowledge beyond how to load a rifle and follow orders. I'm here to give you that. Your cooperation is appreciated but not required. I'll teach whether you listen or not, but I recommend listening. It makes the time pass faster." Klaus sat in the back, arms crossed, determined to resist. But Mrs. Walsh was compelling. She taught English through baseball terms, the game they'd started playing, through song lyrics, through practical conversations. "You're in Texas," she said. "Eventually, you'll interact with civilians. You need vocabulary, water, bathroom, hungry, help, not because we're coddling you, but because miscommunication gets people hurt." She taught American history, emphasizing the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the idea that governments exist to serve people, not the reverse. "You were raised in totalitarianism," she said bluntly. where the state was supreme and individuals were expendable. I'm teaching you an alternative, democracy, where individuals have rights, where governments answer to the people, where dissent is protected, not punished. That's propaganda, Otto challenged. America imprisons its own citizens, Japanese Americans in camps, blacks segregated, Native Americans on reservations. Don't lecture us about freedom when America has its own sins. You're absolutely right, Mrs. Walsh agreed, shocking them. America is deeply flawed. We preach equality while practicing discrimination. We claim freedom while denying it to millions. Our hypocrisy is real and shameful. She paused. But here's the difference. In America, I can say that out loud. I can criticize my government without being executed. I can teach you to think critically about American failures without disappearing in the night. That's what democracy means. Not perfection, but the freedom to acknowledge imperfection and work towards something better. Klaus found himself leaning forward, engaged despite his resistance. In Germany, Mrs. Walsh continued, what happened when people criticized Hitler? They were arrested, executed, their families punished. Stefan's voice was small. Exactly. That's tyranny. When governments demand perfect loyalty and punish dissent, when they tell you what to think rather than teaching you how to think, that's when evil flourishes. I'm teaching you how to think, how to question, how to evaluate information and form your own conclusions. That's the most dangerous thing I can do, make you capable of independent thought. She smiled. And it terrifies totalitarians everywhere, because thinking citizens are harder to control than obedient subjects. The lessons continued: mathematics, practical skills like budgeting, measurement, calculation, science, basic principles explained through experiments and demonstrations, literature, reading American authors, German authors, learning that stories transcend nationality. Words are weapons and bridges, Mrs. Walsh told them. They were used to make you hate. I'm teaching you to use them to understand. That's the choice you'll face your whole lives. Use language to divide or connect. To wound or heal, choose wisely. Afternoons meant work. Klaus returned to ranch duties with Buck, learning to rope cattle, mend fences, care for horses. The work was hard but satisfying, producing visible results, requiring no violence, allowing his body to exhaust itself so his mind could rest. One evening, Buck's grandson Tommy visited the ranch, a 15-year-old Texas boy with an easy smile and confidence Klaus had never possessed. So you're the German prisoners Grandpa talks about, Tommy said. Not hostile, just curious. You really fought in the war? Yes, Klaus replied in careful English. I fought. What was it like? Klaus looked at this American boy, same age, so different, and told the truth. Hell, constant terror, watching friends die, killing people I didn't hate, being told I was a hero while feeling like a monster. It was hell. Tommy was quiet. My brother joined up. He's in the Pacific. I wanted to go with him, but Dad said I'm too young. I was mad. Thought I was missing out on adventure. He looked at Klaus. But you're saying it's not adventure? It's the opposite of adventure. Adventure suggests excitement, growth, positive challenge. War is degradation. You become less human, not more. You survive by shutting down everything that makes you a person. There's no glory, only trauma. My grandpa says the same thing. He was in the Great War. Never talks about it except to say that anyone who glorifies combat has never experienced it. Tommy kicked at the dirt. Thanks for being honest. All the propaganda makes it sound heroic. You make it sound real. It's the most real thing I've ever experienced, and I'd give anything to have stayed a child who never learned that lesson. That Sunday, something remarkable happened. The camp received visitors, local church groups bringing donations and offering services. A Baptist minister named Reverend Samuel Jackson addressed the German boys. I know you're prisoners. I know you fought for a regime that committed atrocities. I know some of you are struggling with guilt, with grief, with the weight of what you've done and seen. I'm here to offer what little I can. A listening ear, spiritual counseling if you want it, and the message that redemption is possible for anyone willing to pursue it. Even for us? Stefan asked. Even for child soldiers? Especially for you, because you're victims too. Victims of a system that weaponized children, that doesn't erase what you did. Accountability matters. But it means you deserve a chance to become more than your worst moments. Reverend Jackson's voice was gentle. God's grace extends to everyone, even, especially, those who think they're beyond saving. Several boys attended his service that evening. Klaus didn't. He wasn't ready for religion, for talk of grace and redemption. But he watched from a distance as Stefan, Franz, and others found something in the Reverend's words. Hope, community, the possibility of forgiveness. Monday brought a surprise. Colonel Parker assembled all 63 boys. Next week, families from Herne are hosting a barbecue. You're invited, guarded, supervised, but invited. They want to meet you, show you Texas hospitality, give you a normal afternoon. Why would they do that? Klaus asked. Because they have sons your age, because they believe in the fundamental goodness of treating children, even enemy children, with humanity, because this is Texas and hospitality matters. Parker's expression was serious. You'll go, you'll be respectful. You'll eat their food, play their games, and remember that these are the people you were taught to see as enemies. See if you still believe that after they've fed you brisket and taught you how to throw horseshoes. The week passed in a blur of work, school, meals, and slow adjustment to the impossible reality that they were being treated with dignity. And all the while, Klaus kept circling back to the same question. Why? Why feed them hamburgers and Coca-Cola? Why educate them? Why teach them baseball and offer them spiritual counseling and invite them to family barbecues? Why treat enemy children as children worth saving instead of enemies worth punishing? He didn't have an answer. But he was starting to suspect it had something to do with the medic's last words. It's okay, kid. It's okay. Maybe Americans understood something Germans had forgotten, that children were always worth saving, even when those children had been turned into soldiers, even when those children had killed, even when those children wore the enemy's uniform and deserved punishment. Maybe, just maybe, saving children mattered more than revenge, and that thought, more than anything else, made Klaus believe that Germany had lost more than the war. They'd lost their humanity. And watching Americans extend humanity to their enemies' children, Klaus began to understand what it looked like to win it back. Aye. The barbecue was held on a sprawling property outside Herne, 20 acres of grass, trees, and open sky. 15 Texas families had volunteered to host 63 German prisoners for an afternoon of food and fellowship. Klaus stepped off the bus with pounding heart, expecting hostility. Instead, he saw families setting up long tables, grilling meat over massive barbecue pits, children running and playing, dogs barking. Normal. It looked completely normal. Like a church picnic. Like family reunion. Like the gatherings Klaus remembered from before the war, when weekends meant community and laughter instead of terror and death. Welcome, boys. A large man in a 10-gallon hat approached, the host, a rancher named Bill Henderson. Y'all must be hungry. We've got brisket, ribs, sausage, chicken, all the fixings, plus cobbler for dessert. Come on, don't be shy. The German boys moved cautiously toward the food tables. The smells were overwhelming. Smoke, spices, meat cooking slowly over mesquite wood. An elderly woman served Klaus brisket. Thick slices, dark bark, impossibly tender. Potato salad, coleslaw, beans, cornbread, more food than he could possibly eat. Thank you, he managed in English. You're welcome, sugar. Eat up. You're all skin and bones. She smiled, genuine warmth, not forced politeness. My name's Martha. I taught 3rd grade for 40 years. Retired now, but I still love seeing young people. Even young people who got dealt a tough hand. Klaus carried his plate to a picnic table, sat beside Stefan and Franz. They ate in stunned silence, tears falling onto plates of barbecue that tasted like redemption. "This is better than the hamburgers," Stefan whispered. "How is that possible?" "Texas barbecue," Buck appeared, plate in hand. "It's a religion here. You don't just eat it, you experience it. Henderson's brisket is legendary. Men have proposed marriage to his wife over this recipe." He sat with them, this Texas cowboy eating with German prisoners like equals, like friends. "Why are you doing this?" Klaus finally asked. "Why invite us here? Why feed us your best food? Why treat us like guests instead of prisoners?" Buck set down his rib bone, wiped sauce from his hands. "Because you're 15 years old. Because my grandson's 15. Because when I look at you, I don't see enemy soldiers. I see boys who got used and broken by adults who should have protected them instead." He gestured to the families around them. "Most folks here lost someone in the war. Henderson's son died at Normandy. The Johnson's boy was killed in North Africa. The Martins lost 2 sons, one in Europe, one in the Pacific. Every family here has a reason to hate Germans, to want revenge. Then why? Because revenge doesn't bring our boys back. Because hating you doesn't honor their sacrifice. Because the best way to win this war, really win it, not just militarily but morally, is to prove we're better than the evil we fought. And that means treating enemy children better than Hitler treated anyone." Bill Henderson approached their table. "Boys, after you eat, we're setting up games. Horseshoes, baseball, football. My kids are excited to teach y'all. Never had German visitors before." His daughter appeared, maybe 12 years old, pigtails and freckles, no fear in her eyes. "Are you really from Germany? Do you speak German? Can you teach me some words?" Stefan blinked at her. "You want to learn German?" "Sure. I want to travel when I grow up. Languages are useful. Plus my teacher says the best way to understand people is to speak their language." She pulled out a small notebook. "Start with easy stuff. How do you say hello?" For the next hour, Stefan taught an American girl basic German, while her parents watched with approval. Klaus played horseshoes with Tommy and his friends, laughing when his throws went wild, celebrating when he actually scored. Franz joined a baseball game, surprising everyone with a solid hit. And slowly, imperceptibly, 63 German boys stopped being prisoners and became teenagers at a barbecue. "Over here!" A woman called Klaus toward a makeshift volleyball court. "We need one more player. You know volleyball?" "A little. We played in Hitler Youth before everything." "Well, this is Texas volleyball. Less rigid, more fun. Just hit the ball over the net. Don't overthink it." Klaus played volleyball with American families who laughed at his mistakes and cheered his successes. He stumbled through conversations in broken English, surprised when people listened patiently and helped with vocabulary. He ate cobbler, peach, sweet and warm, topped with ice cream that melted into the crust. Tasted lemonade made from scratch, tart and refreshing in the Texas heat, and he felt something crack inside him. The armor he'd built, the conviction that he was beyond saving, the belief that he deserved only punishment. Because these people, who'd lost sons and brothers to German bullets, were treating him like he mattered, like he was worth saving. Like his childhood, stolen and weaponized, could somehow be reclaimed. Having fun? Mrs. Henderson appeared beside him, her smile genuine. "Yes, ma'am. More fun than I've had in years, maybe ever." "Good. That's the point. You're children. You deserve fun. You deserve normalcy. You deserve a chance to be boys instead of soldiers." Her voice softened. "My son David would have wanted this. He wrote letters from France talking about German prisoners, said most of them were just kids, scared kids following orders because they didn't know how to refuse. He said if he died, he hoped American families would treat German prisoners with the compassion he tried to show them. So this," she gestured to the barbecue, the games, the laughter, "this is for David. This is honoring his memory by being better than hate." Klaus felt tears burning. "I'm sorry about your son." "Me too, honey. Me too. But hating you won't bring him back. Helping you become good men, that might mean his death counts for something." That might mean we build a world where fewer mothers lose their babies to war. She squeezed his shoulder. You're going to be okay, Klaus. It doesn't feel like it now, but you're going to survive this. You're going to build a life, and someday you'll tell your children about the Texas families who fed you brisket and taught you that enemies are just people you haven't befriended yet. The afternoon stretched into evening. As the sun set, painting the Texas sky in impossible colors, the German boys gathered near the buses for the ride back to camp. "Thank you," Klaus told Henderson, his English improving daily, "for this, for seeing us as more than prisoners. You are more than prisoners. You're boys who deserve a second chance. Don't waste it. Build something good from what's left of your youth." Henderson extended his hand. "Y'all are welcome back any time. This was the first barbecue, not the last. We'll do this monthly if Parker approves. Give you something to look forward to besides work and school." Klaus shook his hand. Enemy and friend, prisoner and host, child and guardian, all the lines blurring. On the bus ride back, the boys were quiet, processing, adjusting to the cognitive dissonance of being treated with such unexpected kindness. "I don't understand them," Otto finally said, his bitterness eroded slightly. "Why they're doing this, what they want from us." "Maybe they don't want anything," Franz suggested. "Maybe they're just being decent. Maybe that's what decent people do. They treat everyone with humanity, regardless of uniform or nationality or past actions. That's naive. Or maybe it's what we forgot, what Hitler taught us to forget, that humans deserve dignity just for being human, not because they've earned it, not because they're useful, just because they exist." Franz's voice was thoughtful. "Maybe that's what makes America different, not that they're perfect. Mrs. Walsh showed us they're not, but that they try, they aim for ideals even when they fall short. That's more than the Reich ever did." Klaus stared out the window at Texas landscape passing in darkness, tasting brisket and cobbler and hope that shouldn't exist, but somehow did. And he thought about the medic's last words. "It's okay, kid." Maybe it would be. Someday, maybe okay was possible for boys who'd been weapons and were learning to be human again. Maybe Texas barbecue and family games and compassion from people who had every reason to hate. Maybe that was the path back to okay. It seemed impossible, but then again, so did everything else about Camp Hearn. And somehow, impossibly, this place was real. These people were real. This second chance was real, and Klaus was starting to believe he might actually survive to deserve it. June 1945. Germany surrendered officially, though the news barely registered for boys who'd already surrendered months ago. What mattered more was Colonel Parker's announcement, "With the war's end comes new reality. You're no longer prisoners of active combat. You're displaced miners awaiting repatriation to a Germany that no longer exists as you knew it." He paused, letting that sink in. "Many of you have no families to return to, no homes, no resources. The military's developing programs, repatriation assistance, vocational training, educational sponsorships. You have options, not unlimited options, but choices. That's more than most war orphans receive." Klaus thought about his options. Return to Hamburg, rubble and memories. Find distant relatives who might resent him for surviving when others didn't. Start from nothing in a defeated nation. Or what? Stay in America, as enemy aliens, as constant reminders of the regime that had murdered millions. The impossibility of his situation hit like physical weight. Mrs. Walsh addressed it in class the next day. "I know you're processing Germany's surrender. I know you're wondering what happens next. So let's talk practically about futures." She wrote on the board skills, language, character references, networks. "You've been here 2 months. In that time, you've learned English, vocational skills, work habits, and how to interact with Americans civilly. Those are assets, marketable assets. Whether you return to Germany or somehow remain in America, you have more resources now than when you arrived." "But we're Germans," Otto protested. "The enemy. Who's going to hire us, sponsor us, give us a chance?" "More people than you think. Because Americans are complicated. Yes, some hate you, but others, like the families who hosted you, like the people working this camp, they see potential. They see boys who can contribute if given opportunity. They see investment in future peace rather than punishment for past war. She pulled out a stack of letters. These arrived this week from Texas families, churches, businesses, all asking about you, about your skills, about possibilities for sponsorship, employment, apprenticeships. You're not as alone as you think. Klaus felt something unclench in his chest. People want to help us? Some people. Not everyone. But enough. Enough that your futures aren't predetermined by your pasts. You have agency. You have choices. Limited choices, but choices nonetheless. Mrs. Walsh's voice was firm. What you do with those choices defines who you become. You can remain bitter, defined by trauma and hatred, or you can build something better. The second option is harder, but it's the only one that leads somewhere worth going. That evening, Reverend Jackson returned for another service. This time, Klaus attended. "I want to talk about forgiveness," Jackson began. "Not forgiving others. That's the easy sermon. I want to talk about forgiving yourself, about how to carry guilt without letting it destroy you." He looked at the assembled boys. 63 faces marked by trauma and guilt. You've done things you regret, things that haunt you, things you'll never fully reconcile. I'm not going to tell you those things don't matter. They do. Actions have consequences. People died because of choices you made. That's a weight you'll carry forever. The brutal honesty was shocking and necessary. But here's what else is true. You were children, weaponized children. You were lied to, indoctrinated, and thrown into horror before you'd developed the moral frameworks to resist. That doesn't erase your actions, but it provides context. And context matters when we're talking about redemption. He paused. Redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about building a future that somehow balances the scales. It's about becoming someone who creates more good than the harm you caused. That's possible, difficult but possible, and it starts with accepting that you're capable of change. That you're not defined by your worst moments, you're defined by what you do after. Klaus felt tears streaming down his face. Because Jackson was describing the impossible, a path forward that acknowledged guilt without demanding permanent self-destruction. "What if the people we killed never get redemption?" Stefan asked, his voice breaking. "What if they're just dead and nothing we do brings them back? Then you honor them by refusing to waste the life they lost, by becoming someone who adds more good to the world than you took away, by making sure their deaths weren't meaningless." Jackson's voice was gentle. "That's not the same as forgiveness, but it's a way forward. And sometimes forward is all we can manage." After the service, Buck found Klaus. "Reverend's got a point. You thinking about the medic you killed? Every day, multiple times a day. Good. That means you're human. That means you understand what you did." Buck sat beside him. "My brother was a medic. Killed at Guadalcanal trying to save a Japanese soldier. He died the same way, trying to help the enemy because that was his job. That's what medics do. They see past uniforms to wounds. Your medic probably did that instinctively, probably didn't even hesitate. That makes it worse. No, that makes it meaningful, because he died living his values, and now you get to live honoring his. You get to become someone who sees past uniforms, who helps instead of hurts, who builds instead of destroys. That doesn't erase what happened, but it means his death contributed to creating one less weapon and one more healer in the world. How do I do that? How do I become a healer when I'm trained as a weapon? Same way you learn anything, practice, day by day, choice by choice. You've been doing it already. Choosing to engage in school instead of resist, choosing to work hard instead of sabotage, choosing to accept kindness instead of rejecting it out of guilt. Those are healing choices. Keep making them. Eventually, they define you more than the weapon choices did. That night, Klaus made a decision. He asked Colonel Parker for a private meeting. "Sir, I want to stay in America, if that's possible. I want to go to school, learn a trade, build a life here instead of returning to Germany. Can that happen? Parker studied him. It's complicated. You're an enemy alien, a minor, a former soldier. The immigration process would be extensive. You'd need an American sponsor willing to vouch for you, guarantee housing, education, guidance. You'd need to prove that keeping you here serves American interests. That's a high bar. I understand, sir, but I'd like to try because Germany is rubble and ghosts. And here I've tasted something different, something that feels like a future instead of just survival. I want to build that. I'll make inquiries, no promises, but I'll see what's possible. Parker's expression softened. For what it's worth, I think you'd make a good American. You've got the work ethic, the willingness to learn, the capacity for growth. Those are the qualities this country was built on. Even for a German who killed Americans. Even then, especially then. Because proving that former enemies can become good citizens, that's how we win the peace. That's how we make sure this was the last war, not just the last one we fought. Klaus left the office with something he hadn't felt since before Hamburg burned. Purpose. He had a goal, a direction, a reason to keep going beyond simple survival. He was going to build a life in Texas, become someone Buck's brother would be proud of. Honor the medic by becoming a man who healed instead of harmed. It seemed impossible. But then again, so did everything else about his second chance at childhood. And if Texas families could feed him brisket despite his uniform, if cowboys could teach him to rope cattle despite his accent, if teachers could invest in his education despite his past, then maybe impossible just meant difficult. Maybe impossible just meant he'd have to work harder than he'd ever worked at anything. But for the first time since putting on a uniform at 14, Klaus believed he had something worth working for. Not redemption. That might never come. But a future. A real future. Built on hamburgers and Coca-Cola and the impossible generosity of people who chose compassion over revenge. And that future, uncertain, difficult but possible, tasted sweeter than any meal he'd ever eaten. August 1945, Buck Harrison submitted sponsorship papers for Klaus. The process was complicated. Background checks, interviews, character references, psychological evaluations. "Why sponsor me?" Klaus asked during a ranch ride. "You have a grandson my age. Why take responsibility for an enemy?" "Because my grandson has everything. Family, home, future. You have nothing except what we give you. That's not charity, that's investment in peace." Buck adjusted his hat. "Every German boy we help become a good man is one less angry young person nursing resentment. Revenge creates cycles. Compassion breaks them." Bill Henderson submitted papers too. So did Mrs. Walsh. So did Reverend Jackson. 15 families offered sponsorship for the 63 boys. "You're all wanted," Colonel Parker announced. "Every single one of you has at least one sponsor willing to vouch for you. That's extraordinary. That's Texas proving that hospitality isn't just words, it's action." Otto cried. For the first time since arriving, the bitter 18-year-old who'd resisted everything broke down, sobbing. "I killed Americans. I wore the SS uniform. I believed the lies. Why would anyone want me?" "Because you're 18, Buck said simply. "Because you have 60-plus years ahead. Because what you were doesn't define what you'll become. Because redemption is always possible for those willing to pursue it." The immigration hearings began. Each boy testified about his past, his regrets, his hopes for the future. Some were approved immediately. Others faced delays, complications, additional scrutiny. Klaus's hearing lasted 3 hours. Questions about combat, about beliefs, about whether he could truly become American after serving Hitler. "I don't know if I can become truly American," Klaus answered honestly, "but I want to try. I want to build a life that honors the people I harmed. That proves children can be saved even after being turned into weapons. Texas gave me that hope. I want to live up to it." 3 weeks later, approval came. Klaus Miller was granted permanent residency conditional on Buck Harrison's continued sponsorship and 5 years of supervised integration. "Welcome to America, son," Buck said, shaking his hand. "Now the real work begins." September 1945. Klaus moved to Buck's ranch, not as prisoner but as ward. A bedroom of his own, real clothes, a place at the family table. Buck's wife Mary welcomed him cautiously. "You're living here, not visiting. That means chores, rules, respect. You make mistakes, we correct them. You cause problems, there are consequences, but you're safe here. That's the deal." Klaus attended Hearn High School that fall, the only German student among 300 Texans. Some students whispered, some parents complained, but Principal Morrison stood firm. "Klaus Müller is a legal resident with the right to education. Anyone who harasses him answers to me." Tommy Henderson became his guide. "Ignore the stares. Half these kids have never met anyone from outside Texas. You're exotic, not scary. Just be normal. I don't know how to be normal. Then fake it until you figure it out. That's what being a teenager is, faking confidence until it becomes real." Klaus joined the baseball team. His swing was improving, his English nearly fluent. Teachers treated him fairly, if cautiously. Classmates slowly warmed to him. But trauma lingered. Nightmares woke him screaming. Loud noises triggered panic. Crowds made him hyperventilate. The war had ended, but his body didn't know that yet. Mary found him one night shaking on the kitchen floor after a nightmare. She didn't ask questions, just sat with him, silent presence until breathing returned to normal. "You're safe," she said simply. "Whatever you're seeing, it's not here. You're in Texas, in our home, safe. Will it always be like this?" The nightmares? Probably. Trauma doesn't just disappear, but they'll get less frequent, less intense. You'll learn to manage them. Mary's voice was gentle. "Buck has nightmares too, from the Great War. 40 years later, they still come sometimes. That's the cost of surviving horror. You carry it. But you don't have to carry it alone." She started leaving warm milk and cookies on his nightstand, small comfort for large wounds. Buck taught him ranch management. "Your future's here if you want it. Work hard, learn the business. Someday, this could be yours." "Why? Tommy's your grandson. This should be his. Tommy's going to college, wants to be a lawyer, doesn't want ranch life." Buck smiled. "But you? You love this work. I see it. You belong here. Blood doesn't make family. Choice does. And I'm choosing you." Christmas, 1945. Klaus's first American Christmas as free person, not prisoner. The Harrison family included him in everything. Tree decorating, carol singing, gift exchanging. They gave him a high school class ring. "You're Hearn-colored. Part of the tradition now," Tommy explained. Klaus gave them the only thing he had, a carved wooden box he'd made in shop class. Clumsy, imperfect, but crafted with care. "It's beautiful," Mary said, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Klaus." That evening, they drove to the Henderson barbecue, now a regular event where 63 former prisoners gathered with their Texas families. Stefan was there, thriving with the Johnsons. Franz, walking with a prosthetic leg, working at the hardware store. Even Otto, slowly shedding bitterness, learning carpentry with Reverend Jackson's congregation. "We survived," Stefan said as they shared cobbler. "More than survived. We're building lives. Who would have believed that a year ago?" "Not me," Klaus admitted. "I thought we were dead boys waiting for execution. Instead, we got second chances wrapped in hamburgers and Coca-Cola." They laughed, the sound strange and precious. Laughter that meant healing was possible, but not everyone succeeded. 2 boys had been deported after violating sponsorship terms. One had attempted suicide after nightmares became unbearable. The weight of trauma didn't lift evenly. "We're the lucky ones," Franz said quietly. "We got families who saw past uniforms. Others weren't so fortunate. We owe it to them, to the ones who didn't make it, to build good lives, to prove this program worked." Klaus graduated high school in 1948. Buck gave him a choice, college or the ranch. "I want both." Community college for business, then full-time ranching. I want to run this place properly, make it profitable, honor what you've built. Then that's what we'll do. Buck extended his hand. Partners? Partners. 1950. Klaus was 20 years old, managing significant ranch operations. The war felt distant, not forgotten, but no longer defining every moment. He'd gained citizenship. Fallen in love with a Hearn girl named Sarah Mitchell, daughter of a man who'd lost a brother at Normandy, but chose to see Klaus as individual, not enemy. You really going to marry a German? Sarah's uncle asked at a family dinner, not hostile, just confused. I'm marrying Klaus, who happens to be German-American. There's a difference. Sarah took Klaus's hand. He's the kindest man I've met. Works harder than anyone, makes me laugh, treats me with respect. His accent doesn't change that. They married in 1951. Reverend Jackson officiated. The Harrison and Henderson families filled the church. Tommy was best man. Never thought I'd see the day, Tommy joked during the toast. German soldier turned Texas rancher, proves redemption's real. Or at least, that we Texans can civilize anyone with enough barbecue. Laughter filled the hall. Easy, genuine laughter that meant Klaus belonged. But ghosts remained. Klaus still woke screaming sometimes, still flinched at fireworks, still carried guilt that therapy and time couldn't fully erase. Does it bother you, he asked Sarah one night after a nightmare, that I killed people? Does it bother you that I can't understand what you survived? Sarah touched his face. We both carry things the other can't fully grasp. That doesn't mean we can't build something good together. They had 3 children, raised them to speak both English and German, taught them that heritage and loyalty weren't mutually exclusive, that you could honor where you came from while building where you were going. Klaus expanded the ranch, hired other immigrants, Korean War refugees, displaced Europeans, anyone needing a second chance, built a reputation for fair treatment and hard work. You're doing what Buck did for you, Sarah observed, paying forward the grace you received. Trying to. Some debts can't be repaid, only passed forward. 1985. Klaus was 55, grey-haired but strong. Buck had passed years ago, leaving the ranch to Klaus as promised. Tommy had become a judge. Stefan ran a successful restaurant. Franz taught woodworking at the high school. The former child soldiers of Camp Hearn had become pillars of Texas communities. Proof that enemies could become neighbors, that children were worth saving, that compassion created better outcomes than revenge. Klaus's grandson, named Buck Harrison Müller, asked one day, Opa, were you really a German soldier? Yes, when I was younger than you are now. Did you kill people? Klaus didn't lie. Yes, I did things I regret every day. Things I can never undo or fully atone for. Then how are you happy? How do you live with it? I live by building something good from what's left, by raising a family, running a fair ranch, helping others the way I was helped. It doesn't erase the past, but it means the past doesn't define the future. Klaus pulled out an old photograph. 63 German boys at their first Texas barbecue, eyes wide, holding plates of brisket. That was us, 40 years ago. Broken children who'd been turned into weapons. Texas families looked at us and saw boys worth saving. That choice changed everything. It gave us futures when we deserved only punishment. Why'd they do it? Because compassion is stronger than hate. Because they understood that children, even enemy children, deserved chances. Because treating us like humans instead of monsters was revolutionary. Klaus smiled. And because hamburgers and Coca-Cola taste the same, regardless of what uniform you used to wear. Young Buck studied the photo. I want to be like them, like the Texans who saved you. And remember this, how you treat people when you have power over them defines who you are. Texas taught me that. They had every reason to be cruel. They chose kindness instead. That's what made them great. Klaus died in 1998. Surrounded by children and grandchildren, his funeral filled Herner's largest church. The obituary read, Klaus Müller, beloved husband, father, rancher, and American. Proof that redemption is always possible for those who pursue it. At the service, Tommy, now elderly himself, spoke. Klaus once asked me why we helped them, why we fed German boys brisket when they'd killed our friends. I didn't have a good answer then, but I do now, because that's what civilized people do. They see past uniforms to children. They choose futures over pasts. They build bridges instead of walls. He paused. Klaus spent 70 years proving we made the right choice. He became a great Texan, a great American, a great man, not despite his past, but because he refused to be defined by it. That's the lesson. We're not our worst moments. We're what we build after. The German boys of Camp Herne, the ones who survived, who thrived, who built lives from ashes, they gathered one last time. Old men now, but forever bonded by hamburgers and Coca-Cola and the impossible grace of Texas families who chose compassion when hate would have been easier. He made it, Stefan said, tears falling. Made it all the way from child soldier to respected grandfather. That's what we were fighting for. Not redemption, just the chance to build something good. We all made it, Franz added, because someone fed us like humans and treated us like children and believed we were worth saving. That's what changed everything. They stood at Klaus's grave, 63 child soldiers reduced to 18 old men, and remembered the fear, the hunger, the trauma, the impossible kindness of strangers who saw their humanity when no one else did. And they remembered the taste of that first hamburger, that first Coca-Cola, that first moment when dignity was extended and hope became possible. Because in the end, that's what saved them. Not the food itself, but what it represented. The revolutionary idea that enemies are just people you haven't fed yet. And once you share a meal, once you see each other's humanity, once you choose compassion over revenge, everything changes. The war ends, the healing begins. And children soldiers become grandfathers who teach the next generation that kindness is strength, mercy is courage, and the best way to win a war is to make sure the next generation never has to fight one. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to remember that how we treat children, even enemy children, defines our civilization. The burgers we share today become the peace we inherit tomorrow.